Hey everyone, welcome back. Some of today's stories are pretty dark. I recommend looking at the pinned comment and look at the timestamps for any stories that you may want to skip. I'll have them labeled, so be sure to check there, because some of these are dark and I'm sure some of you don't want to hear them. All that being said, if you're all ready, let's get into the stories. And remember to always stay hungry. This event took place back when I was in college and occurred way before things like cell phones existed. I was an undergraduate at the time and attended a school in the Appalachian Mountains. The school was in a small town, and I soon came to realize that the townies, that is, people who grew up there, didn't really care for us students. I was a junior at the time, and it happened during a cold winter. I had heard a story regarding a certain townie that liked to frequent a popular bar called the Club. It was a place frequented by both students and the townies. The way this story went was there was this guy who would come out on Saturday evenings just to pick on students. The past weekend, he had sat down at a table uninvited where a group of students were drinking beer. He just sat there silent and unwelcome. Eventually, he had grabbed the thigh of a male student. He then assaulted them when the student gripped him by the arm and told him to let go. Supposedly, the students all had to go to the hospital due to injuries sustained during the beating. The owner didn't do a thing about it either, also being a townie. Well, the next Saturday night rolled around, and I had told my buddies, let's teach this jerk a lesson. I was raised by my dad not to ever be a victim, and to always look out for my friends. I played pool and poker to help put myself through school, so I knew how to handle myself. Having heard the townie liked to punch his victims in the solar plexus, I got some magazines and taped them around my torso with a roll of electrical tape. I also got an empty Coke bottle and put it in a jacket pocket. We waited until around 10 p.m., then headed over to the bar and got a table, leaving one chair empty right beside me. We were enjoying a pitcher when one of my friends told me that he was there now. We made sure not to look at him and just kept on drinking. Eventually, he came over and then sat down in the empty chair that was right beside me. Very casually, I turned to look at him and smiled. Sure enough, he immediately grabbed me by the leg. "Oh, hey there, fella," I said, smiling as I took another sip of beer. He had a hard grip on my thigh as he stared back at me, not saying a word. "Well, you certainly aren't a shy one," I said, and my friends all laughed. It had grown silent. Everyone in the bar was watching now. I had a nice pinch of Copenhagen stuffed between my cheek and gums. I spit into one of his eyes, which caused him to involuntarily close both. Immediately, I punched him in his throat as hard as I could, knocking the creep backwards. He fell out of his seat, landing flat on his ass. "Take it outside, y'all," yelled the owner from behind the bar. We stepped out into the back alley, followed by the townie. His eyes blazed with anger as he quickly came towards me. He took a quick swing, which I blocked as I pulled out the Coke bottle, gripping it by the neck. I swung back hard, landing a savage blow against his thick skull. I had felt it connect a satisfying thud. His head snapped back and he stumbled. I kicked his legs out from underneath him, then we circled around him and started kicking him with our steel-toed Doc Martens. He tried to get up, but we just kept on kicking him as hard as we could, really working up a good sweat while doing so. He hadn't really tried to yell or scream, but soon enough, he was crying like a baby. This went on for quite a while until we eventually heard whining sirens approaching. "Let's go," I shouted, and we legged it out of there as fast as we could go. Later on, we were told that an ambulance had come to the bar to cart off the unconscious townie on a stretcher. Needless to say, we didn't return to the club anytime soon. I had never been stalked before, but this is the first time in my life that I have. After the situation happened to me, I don't think that I'll ever be the same, as it was so horrifying it left me with a permanent feeling. I worked at a coffee shop in my small town, and this customer who was always unusual, well, he always came in almost every day asking for the same order. He came by so often that he was a regular at this point, and we all knew him very well. I got a feeling that this customer started to take a liking to me since he would always ask me about my day and try to get to know me on a more personal level. He would ask about if I had any pets, if I had a boyfriend, you know, the usual stuff. I didn't want to hurt his feelings and I did want to be friendly. So I told him simple things like I had a dog and a parrot and that my family didn't live very close by, but that I was very close with them. I didn't think much of it. The man didn't seem threatening or anything at all. He seemed like a genuine person who was just trying to get to know his local barista. It wasn't that he was unattractive or anything either, but I just wasn't interested in him or even dating at all for that matter. One day when I was on my way to work, I saw that he was standing outside of the coffee shop. This wouldn't be weird other than the fact that it was like 4 in the morning and I was doing the opening shift. I assumed that he just woke up early or something and decided that he would just wait for his coffee. It gave me a little bit of a creepy vibe that he was outside of the coffee shop so early standing there and just sort of watching me. But I tried to ignore him and just kept on doing the usual morning routine. Just opening, cleaning the machines, and just getting ready for the day. But it still gave me an eerie feeling to know that he was watching me. He came inside and ordered the usual, but didn't really say anything to me, which was kind of odd for him. As I said prior, I don't have any interest in him, but when my coworkers came for their shift, I asked them if they had ever seen him come to the shop so early. They all kind of looked at me and gave me a weird look and just brushed it off, saying, "Oh, he probably just had an early shift at work and just wanted some coffee. But no, he's actually never come that early, and we only ever see him when you're on shift." I tried not to think too much about it, but it didn't sound well with me knowing that he was only showing up when I was at work. A few weeks passed and I didn't see him in the mornings anymore, but he still came in during his usual time to order as usual. But one day when I went home after my shift at around 7 p.m., I came home to my lawn freshly mowed. I assumed one of my neighbors decided to mow my lawn for me, but I thought that was quite interesting. I'd started to notice even more strange things happening around my house, like my grass being trimmed and my bushes being pruned. I was trying to think good thoughts like my neighbors are just being good people, just trying to help keep my lawn clean, since, I didn't really do that kind of work. After about a month of this unusual behavior happening to my lawn and garden, the man came in for his usual coffee, but instead of asking about my family or hobbies, he then said, "I think it's about time you give me some compensation for all that yard work." I laughed, assuming that he heard me talking to my coworkers about what was happening, and I just told him, "Ah, you're very funny, but I know it wasn't you. I think it's my neighbors. Actually, I'm not really quite sure who it is." I was expecting a playful laugh or really anything, but instead he grabbed his coffee out of my hands and then just left without saying a word. I won't lie, after that my blood went cold. That day I was the one closing up shop, and as I was walking out to my car, I had noticed someone in the distance looking at me. The coffee shop was in a sketchy area, and I kept walking to my car as fast as I could, but they had started walking behind me. I fumbled to get my keys, shoving them in my car, and just in time I slammed the door shut before they got to me. After I was safe in my car, I had turned to see who it was that was following me, and I had seen the man from the coffee shop. My heart began to beat even faster. I was absolutely terrified. I didn't know what to do, what to think, or what to say, inspecting every inch of him, hoping it was just a trick of the imagination. The closer I looked at him, I noticed that he had something on his shirt. It looked like blood. Immediately I panicked, wondering whose blood it could be soaked all over him, until I saw him reach for his back pocket and he pulled out my pet bird, Timothy. I screamed in horror looking at Timothy's head in his hands, even more terrified than before. I then put the car into drive and drove off. I wanted to get home as quick as possible and make a police report as quickly as possible as well. As I pulled into the driveway shaking from the previous situation that I just found myself in, I saw that my front door was wide open now. There was no second thought in my mind that the bird in his hands was Timothy as I walked through the front door, absolutely horrified that someone might be inside the house. I'm relieved to see that my dog didn't run away and was okay, and that they were also very happy to see me. This gave me some well-needed positivity after the horrific scene that I just witnessed while holding my dog. I dialed 911 to report the situation, but when I called them, the police had told me that someone had already called in about the man at the coffee shop. They told me that since they had no reason to suspect that I was part of the case, that I wasn't allowed to know what happened, but after that day I never saw him again. I also never got to find out what happened to him. This event took place in early August of 2019 when I was 16 years old. For reference, I'm from a small town in Serbia where nothing really happens, just sometimes from time to time. I'm at first going to explain what my house looks like so it would be easier for you guys to understand this. My house is a 2-story house and it has 3 apartments all in one building, 2 on the first floor and 1 upstairs. The upstairs floor entrance is from the outside. My parents and my sister, who I'll refer to as M for privacy reasons, and I live on the first floor apartment. My grandmother also lives on the first floor apartment next to ours, and nobody lives upstairs as it's mostly used as a storage space. I was home alone with M on that early August morning. It was still summer break, and we would often stay home alone because our parents worked and my grandma was out of the house. M is 5 years younger than me, which means that she was 11 at the time. Around 8:30 a.m., I woke up to the sound of glass shattering. At first, I thought it was our neighbors, as they would often do stuff in their backyard. So at first, I wasn't that concerned and just went back to bed. The shattering continued and I couldn't fall asleep, so I decided to head outside and check it out. Our house is fenced all around, so I went in our backyard. I saw a man holding a brick and banging on a window. It was a window in my grandma's apartment. We made eye contact and I screamed, and he went straight to the woods as we have the woods behind our house. I then immediately went back inside. M was sleeping and claimed she didn't hear anything, even though her room was right next to our grandma's. I immediately called my parents and my grandma to inform them about what just happened. All 3 of them came home quickly, and we called the cops. By the time the cops arrived, of course, the man was gone, but he was later found and he was locked up. It turned out to be one of our neighbors. He was a drug addict. Now, I'm going to tell you what happened a few weeks before this event. One day we noticed literal shoe prints on our wall in our pantry. We knew that someone broke in as our window was always open, plus we had a ladder under the pantry window. I know this was very dumb, but at the time we were renovating our house, so stuff was always there around the house. Luckily, our pantry door was always locked. We would often hear footsteps around the house at night whenever the windows were opened. Some stuff was also stolen from our property. We think it was all connected to the same man that broke our window. That's the whole story. Please stay safe, everyone. For context, I'm a 21-year-old farm boy from a small town in northeastern North Dakota. I have one friend who's a few years my youth who's like my brother. To respect the privacy of those involved, I will not be using their real names. We'll call him Brady. Now, Brady and I had one more addition to make our dynamic duo into the 3 Musketeers. We'll call him Carson. My story starts in the early summer of 2022. All 3 of us were all very happy. Brady and I were living our best lives. I was farming with my dad and had a beautiful girlfriend to spoil. And Brady was working at the town's pool and would occasionally hang out with a certain female coworker of his. Now, Carson was working at a John Deere dealership a couple of towns over, and he was making good money while doing so. However, all good things must come to an end. My girlfriend became my ex. Brady and his summer fling had parted ways when she went to college. Carson also went off to college to be a John Deere diesel mechanic. We all sort of just went on a 6-month bender due to dissatisfaction with the current hand life dealt us. Here's where the story begins to heat up. One night we were all hanging around in my family shop shooting darts and talking about life. That is the night that we all decided to take our faith lives more seriously. We all knew who God was and we believed him. But our faith didn't really play a part in our day-to-day lives. Well, we changed that. We started going to church more and more, and even made prayer an everyday thing. One day I was on my way home from my last day of college. Although I had a reborn sense of self-worth due to my rekindled faith, I still couldn't get over my ex to save my life. As I was driving, I got a call from Carson asking if I wanted to have a Bible study at his old church that he was a member of. I of course said yes. I tell him that I want clarity and why I can't get over her, so he prays about it. Now, this church is a loud church. You can certainly hear doors open and people walk around the concrete floor covered by cheap carpet. Carson and I were alone and he was praying out loud. When he prayed, "Lord, please make your plans clear for Andy in regards to his past relationship," Andy being me, I heard a whisper then say, "She's coming back." It wasn't in Carson's voice. I asked him if he heard the voice too, but he didn't. I chose to not believe that I was hearing things and sort of just celebrated on the inside. Fast forward 2 to 3 months. My faith would falter and I would ask God for signs that it was him that I heard that day. Every time I'd ask, I'd see her in a town that neither one of us are from. It was all at different times on different roads, so I know it wasn't her coming home from work or whatever. During this time, we had a worship service at the church that I heard the whisper in. This is also when Brady and I started to, notice things. Carson was under the wing of a pastor of a church about an hour west of our town. Now, this pastor isn't your usual pastor. He's charismatic. At first, he seemed to be a genuine, kind man. Oh, how deceived we were. Carson came to us one day saying how he can speak in tongues and incorporating it into the services. Now, I believe that speaking in tongues is possible, but not everyone can do it. Carson then tried forcing us to speak in tongues as well. The final straw for my participation in the worship service was when Carson gave a sermon saying the congregation wasn't worshiping to his standards. I still considered Carson as a brother, even after that. Well, harvest started, and it was in the waning days of the worship service's existence. He told me that I needed to come because, I honestly don't even remember his excuse. I told him that I can't because I have to harvest and it was a late year. He then hit me with the, "Are you really choosing harvest over God?" That sent me. I told him, "No, but Jesus says if you don't work, you don't eat," and I hung up. Carson dropped out of college and got fired because he wanted to read his Bible more than work. He hasn't had a job since Moses parted the Red Sea. Well, that sparked an argument. The next time we all got together, Brady and I confronted Carson about our concerns. Carson straight up told me that he hasn't been praying for my ex because he doesn't like her and because she's attractive and he doesn't think it'll happen. We all sort of parted ways after that. Brady continued to hang out with Carson, but really only because he wanted to be supportive. Props to him. Well, Brady calls me one night and tells me that Carson basically doxed him and his family. His mom does yoga, and Carson and his pastor friend don't like it. Apparently she's evil now for doing that, and so is his dad because he allows it. His dad is a pastor at a church in our town, and he's one of the wisest and kindest people I've ever met. Genuinely a good guy. Here's the meat and potatoes of the story. There's this girl. She had been broken up with by her fiance, and she was in a very vulnerable and easy to manipulate position. You can probably guess where this is going. Carson and this pastor took her in. And took her in they did. They brainwashed her into thinking that her family is her biggest enemy and they don't really love her. They told her that her parents really wanted a boy, and her parents named her after the male genitalia. So they changed her name to Mary. Not only that, but they had made her burn all her Harry Potter stuff that she had, because she can't be enjoying fictional stories if she follows God apparently. Not only that, but they made her burn this toy chest that her grandpa had made her because it had Native American dream catchers on it, and that culture is part of the occult. Mind you, she's 24 years old, but still, it's a thoughtful gift from her grandpa. And you think that's all, right? Just wait. She now lives with this pastor and his family. Not only that, but Carson now believes that he can tell if things are evil or not by just simply touching them. You may be wondering where her parents are in this and what their thoughts are. Well, they wanted to set up an appointment to talk with the pastor Carson's hanging out with. He says that's no problem, until they asked to bring their pastor, Brady's dad, with as well. Carson's pastor friend had them come many months later, and when the day of the appointment arrived, Brady's dad and this girl's parents went to that pastor's church. What did they find out? Nothing. Absolutely nothing. Apparently, the pastor didn't think he had to tell them anything. When Brady's dad asked them why he had them drive an hour just to be kicked out, yes, he kicked them out. He was then met with, "You don't want to know." Nothing much has happened since then. Brady and I are still brothers, and Carson is just someone that we used to know. We pray for him and everyone involved. All I ask is that you pray for them as well, and please pray for my ex too. Nothing else has happened there either. I guess all we can do at the end of the day is keep our faith and just really pray for Carson. To provide some context for this story, I grew up in a small town in the middle of Washington state. The population there is around 850 people. You can imagine that besides a yearly parade, nothing really goes on, and it's really a dead-end town. The major things that the people at the time this happened were concerned with were the economy crash and the drugs slowly making their way into the town, but that's another story. In our town, we had 2 gas stations, both owned by Chinese immigrants, one of which is the setting for this story. This happened back in 2009, and some friends and I were hanging out in town during the summer. We all had our scooters as we rode through the couple of streets racing each other and just having conversations the kids our age had. Pokemon, girls, and whatever movie or music was popular at the time. As we were riding behind one of the old stores, we all heard a commotion going on in one street in front of us. We decided to go ahead and ride to wherever we heard everything, and there I saw something that I would have never expected. I saw multiple cop cars, an ambulance, and a giant pool of blood on the sidewalk from across the street. A crowd of townspeople was building up by this point, as nothing of this magnitude ever happens normally. All of us in the crowd were clamoring to find out what happened, and it would take a couple of weeks for us to learn the full story. You see, at one of those gas stations I mentioned, you had the old-fashioned style of pumps where you turn the handle, place your pump in the vehicle, fill up the vehicle, and then pay for what you owe at the end inside of the station. Lots of people liked this station because it was old-fashioned and cheaper. Everything was fine that day, until one customer rolled into the station. From what I heard and read about later, the guy did all the steps except wanting to go in and pay. Almost on instinct, the co-owner of the station walked out, a woman in her 40s telling him he needed to pay for the gas, and then without warning, he ran her over with his vehicle and proceeded to back over her and then drive over her again. From what I heard, the initial scene was awful, and of course she was confirmed dead at the scene. The man was actually caught by the police, and the town was glued to the TV as the case was broadcasted locally. This guy, as it turns out, was completely out of his mind, most likely a paranoid schizophrenic. He was quoted in the bathroom during the trial stating that he was Jesus Christ and that everyone in the court should bow to him. After the trial, he was unsurprisingly deemed insane and unfit for a murder trial. This is surprising due to his rap sheet, but the judge saw otherwise due to this guy being off his meds. After this occurrence, people moved on past it, and now it's barely even remembered, except by those that saw what happened that day with their own eyes. Hey everyone, apologies for the interruption from the stories, but I wanted to talk about today's sponsor, Uncommon Goods. Spark something uncommon this holiday with just the right gift from Uncommon Goods. The busy holiday season is here, and Uncommon Goods makes it less stressful with incredible hand-picked gifts for everyone on your list, all in one spot. Gifts that spark joy, wonder, delight, and that is exactly what I wanted feeling. They scoured the globe for original, handmade, absolutely remarkable things. Somehow they know exactly the perfect gift for every single person you know. I actually just got myself this omelet maker, seriously, and I'm really excited to use it because I love making breakfast. They've got tons of things just like this and more. I'm sure you'll be able to find a nice holiday gift on there for your friends and family. Also, when you shop at Uncommon Goods, you're supporting artists and small and independent businesses. Many of their handcrafted products are made in small batches, so shop now before they sell out this holiday season. To get 15% off your next gift, go to uncommongoods.com/cannibal. That's uncommongoods.com/cannibal for 15% off. Don't miss out on this limited time offer. Uncommon Goods. We're all out of the ordinary. Okay, obligatory backstory. I live in a tiny town in northern Kentucky. When I say tiny, I mean microscopic. It's a nice neighborhood in a little typical southern town. Low crime rate, everyone knows everyone. Lots of fundamentalists, lots of pickup trucks. Not my particular cup of tea as an adult, but on the whole, it seemed like a very safe place to grow up. You walk to school, no school bus. The city is so small you can get from one end to the other in about 20 minutes on foot. Big football town. Not much else to really do. The biggest points of interest are the church, the football field, and the Kroger, which is a grocery store for those who don't know. This happened to me when I was 16 years old. It was a typical Friday night, and I was at home watching and hanging out with my kid brother who was 9 years old at the time. We recently had new neighbors move in next door, and their kid Austin was his age. They became best friends pretty much immediately. There's always a football game on Friday nights in season, and the whole town is there. Lots of my friends and his friends too. I wasn't partial to the games. Once I'd seen one, I'd seen them all. I would still occasionally walk down to the field to meet up with some buddies to do something afterwards, but that's really about the extent of it. Phone rings and my brother gets to it first. I'm quite sure we were playing a video game of some kind, and around this time I'm fairly sure it was Smash Bros. Melee on the old GameCube. He was intimidatingly good for his age, and we had a nice sibling rivalry going. He always played with Roy, and I with Marth. These matches were absolute nail-biters. He hangs up and he tells me Austin is at the game with his folks, and can we pretty please go down and get him? I didn't want to be down there in a huge crowd of sweaty rednecks, and I told him so. He then replies, "But Jen, his mom says he can't walk home without us. He wants to come home and hang out. We can do a 3-person tournament. Come on, Jen, please." With some hesitation, I agree. It's a 10-minute walk maximum, and at least we wouldn't have to stay. We'll go down, grab Austin, and then we're noping it back here to play some Melee. We head up to our dead-end street, hang a left, and start down the main road. The sports complex is on this road, and it's just at the bottom of a hill. It was about twilight, and from at the top of the hill we could already hear the marching band and the cheering. I didn't see many folks around, but nothing looked unusual either. I didn't really expect to see anyone. Pretty much everyone was down at the game. Looking ahead, I could see parked cars lining the street, with the bulk of them right by the turn off to the sports complex. He's doing the typical kid brother thing as we walked. "Hey Jen, did you know owls can turn their heads almost completely around? Hey Jen, me and Austin had a shoe throwing contest and my shoe went so far I almost couldn't see it anymore. Hey Jen, look at this flower, it's awesome." At about the halfway mark, I see a gold SUV pull up across the street just opposite where we were walking. It sits for about 10, maybe 15 seconds, and then a man gets out just as we're passing by so that he's behind us. It's an older guy, mid-40s. In retrospect, this guy screamed creeper. Weasel face, tall and wiry, weird freaking smile and sneer. At the time, however, I didn't think twice. Of course, just a guy going to the game, probably just meeting up with his family. My brother's on my left, I'm on the right, and we just keep walking normally. After about 30 seconds or so, I hear shuffling. I turn around out of reflex just to glance at what's going on. This guy's gaining on us. Okay, no big deal. He's probably trying not to miss anything. He'll probably walk right on past. I really would have loved to keep a brisker pace myself, but I had the kid brother in tow and his 9-year-old legs just couldn't handle that speed of walking. We keep on going as usual, but now I've made a mental note. A little more time goes by, maybe a minute, and I start thinking to myself, I wonder why he hasn't breezed on by us. This guy sure looked like he was in a hurry, so I turned around again. This man is right behind us, and I mean close enough for me to see the creepiest smile and sneer that I've ever seen on the face of a person. Only he wasn't behind us per se. He was directly behind my brother, and when I happened to glance back, he had his arms out right in front of him. He was reaching for my brother and almost had a hold of his upper right arm. I caught this sicko in nearly mid-snatch. I reached out my left hand and put it around my brother's back. Probably 5 seconds went by, but it felt like a lot longer than that. After I had an arm barrier, I do a quick scan of the street. There's no one else around. No witnesses, no help. I'm only 16. This guy's a lot bigger than me. What the hell am I gonna do? I lean down and say as quietly and as calmly as I can, "Come on, Ross, let's get there. I bet I can go faster than you." I start to speed walk, and so does my brother. I have my arm on his back, and I'm half pushing him, rushing him along as fast as he can walk. I can see the sports complex, and it's just down the hill. We're about a minute or so away at most. After about another 30 seconds or so, I'm not quite sure, the whole thing seemed to go by in slow motion, and I turned around again. The guy is speed walking too now. He's matching our pace to keep right behind my brother, and he's gaining again. Now I really start to panic. He's really after us. There's no explanation. I don't know him, and I almost caught him grabbing the kid. Now he's almost in grabbing distance again. He's picking up speed, and he's freaking smiling. Well, sneering. It was a full predatory look. I turn back around, and I can now see that we're so close to the stadium. So damn close. If we can just get down there a little bit more, the property opens up and there'll be more people everywhere. I have to get down to all those people right now. I try to sound calm, but I'm sure I didn't at this point. "Let's run, Ross. Come on. I'll race ya." And we take off running. I look more at him than what's ahead of me. I'm trying to keep him in my sight the entire time. He thinks it's a game. He smiled and started running his little heart out. I remember feeling a tiny speck of relief. Oh good, he doesn't know that we're about to get assaulted and murdered. And he's pretty fast. He's in it to win it. I see the entrance to the stadium, and I think that we gotta be home free by now. I turn around and this freaking guy is running. He's running after us. It was one of the scariest moments of my life. I knew at that point beyond a shadow of a doubt that this guy is only running to catch up to us. Well, not per se, but to get my brother. He started to gain, but he's not close enough yet. I whipped back around and sped up to my personal max speed. And of course, the kid pumps his own legs to the max because he wants to win a race against his older sister so he can brag about it. Once again, I'm looking directly at him more than the street in front of me, just so I can be sure that he's still there with me. I hear his thuds on the pavement, and I know he's getting close. My heart was now sending electrical currents of fear to the whole rest of my body, and just as I heard him coming up right behind us, we hit the stadium grounds. It was a sharp left turn, and bam, people. There were people everywhere. It was halftime, and the adults were out in the entrance area smoking and talking. The view of the entranceway and all the people was obscured by a stone archway on the street marking the stadium grounds. I had never been so happy to see a bunch of sweaty rednecks in all my life. The guy came right behind, and the second he turned the corner after us and saw all the people, he panicked. I could see the surprise and fear in his eyes. I had turned around at that moment to see where he was, and I looked right at him and locked eyes with him in this beautiful moment. He looked around at everyone, looked at me, looked at my brother, then walked away, all the way back the way we had all come. Ross was out of breath, but he still nudged me to go and collect Austin. I told him to give me a second. I peeked around the stone archway, and I watched this guy walk, not run, but walk back up the street. I stood there and watched him walk all the way back up the hill, walk across the street, get back into his SUV, and then drive away. I think that's when it fully hit me of the very real situation we were just in, and the very real danger. That damn guy was there to get us. Well, not us per se, but my little brother. What's more is that he probably would have had we not made it to the stadium. The crowd spooked him, and most likely that's what saved my brother's life. We found Austin, but I made the whole gang wait until the game was over, then caught a ride home with his folks. No burden on them. We lived right next door. I was shaken up for the whole rest of the night, and for a couple of days after too. This kind of town is the last place in the world you would have thoughts about being snatched in. I also have never told anyone. I never told my parents. I never even told my brother. He's almost 20 years old now, and he could probably handle it, but I just never saw a reason to give him a complex about something that happened years ago. I also never told the police, and I have no idea what happened to Gold SUV guy. I don't know if he lived around here or far away. I don't know if he's been caught, went to jail, or if he's still out there somewhere. I do know for certain that he was there to kidnap my brother that day. I don't know what kind of messed up plans he had for him, but then again, I really don't care to dwell on it. I don't know if I did the right thing or wrong thing, or just how close my brother came to whatever the SUV guy had in the works, but I don't care to dwell on that either. I can tell you, however, that there was one time in my life in which I meaningfully uttered the phrase, "Thank God for the sweaty rednecks." I live in a small town, well under 3,000 people as of the 2010 census. For almost my whole life, my aunt has lived just off the highway a few blocks from the center of town. She was raised here, and her husband, my uncle, was raised in a place even smaller. They couldn't have a more regular small town USA mindset. They raise their son, they work full time, and they don't lock their doors. Since before I was born, an older woman named Ida has lived right across the street from them. She's always been sort of nosy, the type of old lady to sit in the rocker on her front porch and survey the neighborhood, and she's been more and more of a fixture there since her husband passed away 3 years ago. Last week when my cousin came home from school, Ida approached him and asked who regularly visited their house in the middle of the day. He had no idea what she was talking about. Ida explained that she had seen a kid who looked to be about his age, 16, come over 1 to 2 times a week while he was at school and his parents were at work. The kid always walks down the street, up their driveway, and around to the back door to let himself in. After he comes in, she can see him walking around the house through the large picture window in my aunt's living room. Ida said that she had been assuming it was one of his friends, and that's the only reason she hadn't brought it up. She described the intruder as a lanky kid who carried himself awkwardly, always wearing a gray hoodie with the hood up. My cousin was terrified. He immediately called my aunt, who worked 45 minutes away, and relayed the whole story to her. She didn't know anything about the person coming into their house either. After my aunt and uncle were home that night, they did what anyone would do and took stock of their belongings. Nothing that they owned was missing, and after they talked about it, they hadn't even moved anything at all when they got home from work. Whoever's been going into my aunt and uncle's house isn't stealing from them. There has to be some other reason, but we can't figure it out. We're assuming the worst. Yesterday, Edith saw the kid in the gray hoodie coming out at around 10 in the morning. She stayed on her porch and, for the very first time, made eye contact with him. Now before, she had just written him off as someone who should probably be there. Everyone gets the benefit of the doubt in a small town, but this time she stared at him knowingly. He noticed her and met her glance. They were across the street just looking at each other. The kid didn't know what to do. He couldn't go in with Ida just watching him. Apparently he weighed his options and decided to wait. He sat down at the edge of my aunt's yard facing Ida, waiting for her to go away so he could do whatever he does in the house. Ida wasn't going anywhere. It's very apparent she didn't want to become too involved or be targeted or something by the kid. Who knows what he was involved in. But at the same time, she's been neighbors with my aunt for years, and she didn't want to see harm come to her or her family. She stared at him down from her porch until he became frustrated and left, walking all the way back the way he came. She could tell from his mannerisms that he really wanted to get into the house. She even said that he seemed desperate, but there was nothing he could do. Thinking he'd be back today since yesterday was a bust, my uncle took the day off work hoping to catch the intruder. He parked his car a few blocks away and came home to wait. He wasted a vacation day. We don't know who was in the house, when he'll be back, or even what he does in there. I've been trying to think of a clever way to figure out where he's going in the house without him knowing, and they've set up 2 trail cameras outside, and I think in their garage, which is between the back door and the house. But then we still don't know what he's doing in the house. No one's contacted the police. No one has told anyone else for fear that he'll get back to the intruder in the gray hoodie, and none of us have a good plan. So I really have no idea what we're going to do. Hello there, my name is John. This is a true and disturbing story that happened to my young wife Jenny and I when we were 23 years old visiting some friends from high school who had moved to Georgia in the year of 2000. Now, the story does have some very strong child sexual abuse and violence, so those wanting to skip this story, please do so immediately. This story is not for the faint-hearted. My girlfriend at the time, Jenny, and I had met in high school in New Jersey. It was really easy to fall in love with Jenny because she was such a good person and loved to help others. She had big blue eyes and long brown hair with a nice curvy figure. I had short brown hair on a muscular 6-foot-tall build. Jenny and I liked to go to the gym and work out together. We also loved going to the beach. We just really enjoyed spending every moment of our free time together. So not surprisingly, after high school, Jenny and I got married. One day we got some mail that 2 high school buddies of ours who had moved to Georgia were getting married, and they had sent us a wedding invitation. So Jenny and I instantly packed up our Range Rover to head to Georgia to attend their wedding. We arrived in the state of Georgia and really enjoyed our friend's wedding. The day later, we got back into our Range Rover to set off for home in New Jersey again. And this is where our nightmare happened. On the way home, there was a big detour that led us to a small town in Georgia that was way out of the way from where we were supposed to be. I'll tell you, this unknown Georgia town looked like a place straight from the 1930s past. The gas stations and small eating places looked 1930s style, and many places even had white-only and black-only signs on them. Jenny and I were not liking this place right off the bat. Not liking it at all. Jenny and I stopped at a vintage-looking gas station to ask for directions. We didn't see anyone, so I got out of my vehicle to call and see if anybody was there. I walked to the store behind the gas station. As I was doing so, a mean-looking young man with unkempt, dirty, long blonde hair holding a fiddle sitting on a porch at a nearby house told me rudely, "Can't you read? The gas station's closed." I looked around and couldn't see the sign. But then I saw on the side of the store a small sign saying that the place was indeed closed. The young man gave me a very bad and creepy vibe, but I just put on a fake smile and thanked him for his help. This guy was so mean looking and unfriendly that I just didn't want to ask him where the road back to the main highway was. So I started to get back in the Range Rover with my wife Jenny. But just when I did, I saw a man around 80 years old in a preacher's robe walk up to me smiling. He told me that his name was Father Noon. As we introduced ourselves to him and told us our plight, Father Noon told us that he was the pastor at the church 4 houses over. He also told us where we could get on the main highway back to New Jersey. My wife and I thanked him for his kindness, but before we left, Father Noon then invited us to his house for some supper. I started to open my mouth to decline the invitation, but Jenny spoke before me, saying that we would be honored to join the preacher for supper at his house, which was right behind his church. Father Noon told us that he was a preacher for many years in this small town in Georgia, and that he really liked the people there. He said that he was a widower now, but was okay. He said that his congregation and the people around Georgia kept him happy and busy, and took his mind off his late dear wife named Abigail. When we got to the preacher's home, it was very nice. It was a huge old house probably built in the 1920s, with a nice white picket fence surrounding it and a nice garden on each side. The preacher sat us down as he continued talking, as he had made us a nice dinner of chicken, potatoes, rice, corn, and pea soup, along with lemonade to drink on the side. Sitting at his dinner table, I almost asked Father Noon about the white-only and black-only signs on many places around the town, and if he himself had some racist feelings, which Jenny and I really hoped he didn't. But I didn't want to make him angry and ruin a good supper, so I just kept my thoughts to myself. Father Noon seemed like a nice elderly preacher, but I really couldn't wait to get back home to New Jersey again. When supper was over, we waved goodbye to Father Noon and then thanked him for his help. I got into the Range Rover as Jenny took one last look at Father Noon's beautiful garden at the side of the house. I then saw a horrified look on Jenny's face as she rushed back to our vehicle to talk to me. Jenny told me that she saw a beautiful faced girl, no more than 10 years old, with long blonde hair, totally nude in a pink female child's bedroom. There were play dolls and big stuffed teddy bears all around her room and all around her pink waterbed. Next to her bed was a toy pink telephone, along with some child porn photos of little girls in various provocative nude poses lining the walls. The window with the girl inside was small, round, and low, and it was nearly covered by the priest's garden, so you had to look closely to see it, but Jenny's sharp, eagle-like eyes noticed it. I then asked Jenny to show me, and she was right. I was absolutely shocked to see a lovely blonde little girl walking nude in the preacher's side bedroom. The captive girl seemed like she was in a trance and didn't even notice us, even when we tried to get her attention by tapping on the window to her room. This pretty little 10-year-old looking girl was blow drying her hair with a large pink blow dryer after a shower. We also saw in the room with horror a video camera on a stand. Father Noon was no doubt a pedo keeping this underage girl captive while he did horrible things to her for his pleasure. We both just looked at this young girl again as she brushed her long blonde hair with her hairbrush, as she then just admired herself in front of her mirror, fluffing her hair up and flashing a large smile, as if preparing for the preacher's advances on her yet again by making herself look nice and pretty for him. We were thinking about calling the cops right then, but in this sort of racist and isolated small town in Georgia with its own rules, that might not be a good idea. The sheriff and his deputies would probably lock Jenny and I up instead, maybe even kill us to keep Father Noon's pedo secret safe. The sheriff probably knew that Father Noon was a pedo and let him go right about doing it. Hell might even be in on it, and it could even be a pedo ring or something. The main thing Jenny and I had to do was get this minor to safety and then get her back home where she belonged. Just when we turned around to head back to the Range Rover to figure out our next plan of action, we then saw Father Noon come quickly to the side of the house holding a double-barrel shotgun in his hand, aiming it right at us. Father Noon then placed his weapon lower in his arms, telling us he was sorry. He thought we were thieves trying to rob him or something, which he then said happened to him in the past. Jenny and I were relieved that the father didn't see us looking at his captive girl through the window, or he would have actually used his shotgun on us, and we would be dead now. Jenny distracted Father Noon more from his captive girl by saying how much she loved his beautiful garden, making him smile. Jenny and I then got into our Range Rover after thanking Father Noon for the nice dinner, and then left. We didn't leave Georgia though. We checked into a motel in a safer town nearby. We then made a plan to get this poor captive girl out of Father Noon's pedo clutches, and fast. Who knows how many young girls and even boys he abused? God only knows. It was really horrifying to think that this pastor was so nice on the outside, but really a horrible monster on the inside. Jenny and I were thinking about our next plan of action in our motel room. I even had thoughts of buying a gun and taking the captive girl with us by force. But this might not be the greatest idea since Father Noon had his shotgun with him at the ready. Plus, I didn't want to risk shooting the girl by accident with all the wild shooting that might happen. Well, Jenny and I then heard a day later that Father Noon was found dead and naked on the child's pink bed with a bullet on the side of his head. Well, apparently the minor's father finally found his daughter, and he killed Father Noon when he was naked, right when he was in the process of doing absolutely horrible things to the little girl. As ass backwards as things are, the father was actually sent to prison in another town while his kid went to live with her mother, safe and sound in an undisclosed location. Jenny and I later found out that the abducted kid was named Savannah, and she was actually 7 years old, not 10. Jenny and I were happy that the kid was safe and that Father Noon was dead and buried, but we really felt so sorry for her father, who would be locked up for a long time. Since this was a kidnapping, the FBI were involved, and they found and destroyed Father Noon and the corrupt sheriff's pedo ring all together in that town. The young, mean-looking man with the fiddle, whose name was Harley, that I encountered earlier at the vintage gas station, was prosecuted as well, and he was sent to prison for his part in rounding up the underage girls for people like Father Noon, the sheriff, and their other pedo customers around the small Georgia town. The FBI also uncovered some very dark evidence. The 80-year-old Father Noon was probably doing this sort of thing for decades. Jenny and I could totally see the young girl's father's point of view for taking the law into his own hands. I mean, what would you do if your minor daughter or son was kidnapped and being molested repeatedly by a pedophile? A priest, no less. Especially in a town that seemed to go along with such lawless things. I tell you, I was ready to take the law into my own hands myself since this town wouldn't help me. But that girl's father made the decision for me. At least that little girl was safe with her mom now, and Jenny and I could finally go back home to New Jersey and have peace of mind. I really hope that that girl's doing okay now, along with Father Noon's other victims. Hey everyone, that's about it for today's stories. If you have your own story that you would like to send, you can send it in at southerncannibal.com, or you can email it at southerncannibalstories@gmail.com. I look forward to telling your story. Have a good night or good day, everyone. And remember to always stay